get by. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Shamil Shamilov. You could check him out at dNOVOgroup.com. Shamil, before I introduce you formally, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. Since this is part of the Top Agency series, we had on Kevin Hurrigan. Kevin Hurrigan runs Spinutech. He is an agency, Shamil, since 1995. So it was really interesting to hear the evolution of the agency space, the internet, and business over that time period, and just hearing some of the ups and downs during the different decades. Another really interesting one was Todd Taskey. Todd Taskey helps pair agencies with private equity. He helps sell agencies. And he has a Second Bite podcast because he found that when private equity sells or buys the company, and when they sell again, sometimes the founder made more on the second bite than they did on the first. And it was really interesting to hear, again, valuation, M&A, the agency space. That was a really good one too. So check them more out on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. Shamil, we were talking about this a little bit. We're like kind of the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy for the hosts. They can create amazing content, create amazing relationships, most importantly, run their business. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I've found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. We were talking about this, Shamil, that you hit it on the head before we hit record. Actually, you're like, this is great to feature your partners and develop relationships. And I 100% agree with you. That could be for any industry, whether it's mortgage brokerage, real estate, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So
I feel like it's a great idea and it's trendy. But at the same time, I'm always about providing value. And I feel like when you do it, you have to provide value, because you can kind of see how anything trendy that happens out there, whether it's Bitcoin or AI, there's a billion people that jump on it, but very few provide values. And it's a first people kind of that have that unique approach that really make an impact. We could talk about, Joe Rogan's of the world, and there's a billion guys that try to do what he does now, but he's so far ahead of them. But definitely a good avenue.
So I'm going to formally introduce you. Shamil Shamilov is the CEO of dNOVO Group. He has over 13 years of experience in business development and online lead generation, and actually, is really focused on the vision and strategy and implementation and helps generate leads in business for other companies and businesses. So we'll check it out at dNOVOgroup.com. And if you're listening to the audio, there is a video piece. I'm going to share my screen here. But Shamil, talk about dNOVO Group and what you do.
We're a digital marketing agency. Interesting story. So I started as a partner in another agency. We worked together for about 7-8 years, and we parted ways. And we kind of had to reinvent themselves. We had a bunch of law firms that we did work for, although that wasn't exclusively our clients. So we, initially pivoted towards legal. We had some, medical and home improvement, home services clients. We kind of focus on those niches. Again, back in the early days, 10 years ago, right, we did videos, social media management, right? And we kind of, I think you and I spoke about this before we started the podcast. The agency space was a lot more all-encompassing before, where now people are kind of focusing on specific avenues. And what we pride ourselves in is that because we have experience in those niches, we target and kind of we've done it, and we have successful case studies in all three of those, and we focus on those businesses exclusively. We get leads and referrals from other uh, vertices, so to speak, but we try to kind of stick to our guns, right? Simply because we've scaled businesses there, and we have clients that have been with us for close to 10 years.
You've been doing this agency thing for a while. How did you get into, but what's interesting is you really studied kind of political science and government, right? So how did you even get into and stumble into being an agency owner?
I went to Ireland to do my master's degree, and where for my undergrad it was interesting. In Dublin, I realized that while I love studying it, I was surrounded by a bunch of people who, I'm sorry to say this, were idealistic or more idealistic than I was. And, I realized that to really make an impact, you gotta, you know, frankly speaking, make some money, right? And I moved back to Canada after Ireland, and through a friend, met my former business partner and started working for him. And in a year, he kind of offered me partnership in the firm. He was already at it for a couple of years, and we rock and rolled for 7 or 8 years. He was kind of a mentor at a certain point in terms of strategy, sales, people management, right? And then, fortunately or not, we kind of split ways, and we had to, reinvent ourselves. dNOVO with the E in there in Latin, right? It's a legal term. I knew, right? So so the other agency was called Nova Solutions, right? So it's like Nova again, right? We
How
started
is
the journey.
I'm
Yeah.
curious, just for a quick second on I hear of a lot of stories and people part ways, right? What's things that you wish you would have known or things that you are glad that you did to make that kind of an amicable and a good break, right? Because it is like a marriage, right? When people get into these things. So what do you wish you would have known, or what did you think went well that you want other people to know when something happens that maybe they're forced to part
It was a
ways?
stressful period at the time for sure. A lot of kind of uh, you know unanswered questions, some doubt of what's the next correct way, what's the next step. Now looking back at it, it wasn't necessarily immediately a clean break. But looking back at it, we are on good terms, and he's in another space now. Um, no regrets, frankly. I feel like it's a natural evolution. I mean, if you look at every stressful event in your life, whether it's moving to another country, right, new career, after it, the hardships and the difficulties have went by, when you look back at it, it's always a positive experience because you've always learned something or, overcame something. So I treat this the same. I treat this the same. There's nothing, no regrets. There's nothing, that, as you said, I wish I would have known. It is what it is. Like, I was able to take all my clients, a lot of the members of my team, and we kind of parted ways the way we did, branded themselves. And I mean, timing wasn't the best because a year after that COVID, sorry, a month after that COVID started, you know what I mean? So it was a really stressful period, but no regrets whatsoever.
So what were you thinking at the time you're out, you're reinventing yourself and then COVID hits, right? So how did you manage through that period? I mean, it's rocky for everyone, especially if you're okay, I'm getting this started up again.
Uh, so we had ongoing clients that I was able to retain. They kind of left with me, if I may. But even they paused for the first 3 to 4 months, the March, April, May, right? So um, extra pressure not to mess up. And I really felt responsible for the people because there was a couple of key employees that, you know, I hired and they chose to kind of leave with me. And I feel that I couldn't want that. I didn't want that to let them down because of what happened is all around me. A lot of even our clients, you would hear people were like laying off people, right? Because like literally the world stopped for 3, 4 months. And I felt like I couldn't do that to them, you know what I mean? So, it was tough, but we survived. My father said to me once that you always, when your wall is, when your back is to the wall, you kind of overcome and you grow the most, right? And I feel like that was, that times two, right? So new venture, right? Plus COVID. And, you really have to pay attention and be vigilant.
What niches at that time were you in? I'm curious, going forward, did you decide to focus or more go broad at the time? We're talking COVID. What niches were you serving at the time? Talk about the evolution of the niches at that point.
So we were a general agency and he had a lot of plastic surgeon clients. I worked on those campaigns, but was not, they were his accounts, so to speak. We had a number of dentists, home improvement, and I had a bunch of legal clients as well. So initially, my thought process was, and you're talking about, selling and acquisitions, and I was thinking that, we have to specialize on something, and legal was kind of the pivoting point, right? At the time, 40% of our business was legal. Having said that, because I've been doing that at the time for whatever 7 years, we kind of got referrals from other niches. So we kept the medical space and we kept home improvement space. And at one point or the other, we invested more in legal clients. Having said that, you know, I feel that personally, it's more interesting to run campaigns and do business development in more than one. Right? It keeps your mind working and keeps your mind fresh. The things that work for lawyers, they don't necessarily work for home improvement industry.
So at that point, you're like, we have great clients in legal. We may focus on there, but we're not going to turn people away from other niches, and so
It,
you kept that open.
exactly, exactly, exactly. And some of those relationships were very fruitful in terms of for clients or like successful campaigns with lots of referrals, right? And let me tell you this way: for a year or two, we marketed only towards legal. So the website, like we worked with everybody, but we exerted effort to niche ourselves as legal marketeers. But then we kind of said, let's just officially declare that we work with others as well. We still market to everybody, right? We attend a lot more events that are legal in space and like in the legal space, but we still work with a lot of home improvement, and that's probably 40-50% of the business now.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about it because I've seen a lot of agency owners struggle with this. Right? They're like, okay, I have a majority of this segment, but I don't want to turn off these other segments. And it's interesting how you've navigated that on the website we're looking at. So you could see we generate leads for, and it kind of scrolls through law firms, and then it scrolls to medical professionals, and it scrolls through, and then you can see
I'll
kind of the
explain.
industries. There's so you've navigated in a real interesting way. Is like you have these at least showing that you have these specializations, but not focusing on just one niche. Is that
I'm
accurate?
Yeah, yeah, and look, there are a ton of agencies that do like just literally. There's a company that just does literally pavers and asphalt, right? And they niche themselves as that. At the time, like if I was starting from scratch, we perhaps would follow a similar path, but we were already doing decent numbers when dNOVO was born, and it's just like turning down business, right? And there was some concern about people thinking, oh, he's not serious in this or he's not serious in that. But when they speak to us and we consult, I feel like, we have enough knowledge and experience and we have enough successful case studies to make it grow. Like, you know, uh, definitely a concern, especially you and I were talking about that the marketing, world has changed. In the beginning, it was like people were looking for a company that could do your Facebook and, do your organic and web design. But now that's no longer the case. I feel like people specialize and do one thing better than the others. So it was a tough decision, but we kind of try to go in those three directions.
So you chose to niche. I mean, you have specific industries that you serve, but really chose to niche in a specific service. Talk about the evolution of the services. You said like way back when we did a little bit of everything. Talk about how that evolved.
I feel like people were looking, 10, 15 years ago, people were looking for a company that could, do your website, set up your social media, and like Facebook 10 years ago versus Facebook 5 years ago versus Facebook or Meta now, different beasts, right? I remember the time when you couldn't get leads that were tangible from the particular social media platform, and now you can, right? And then there are other platforms coming out. So I feel like people were looking at one-stop shop before, where now digital marketing is at a stage where you realize people can't be good at everything, and they're looking for, companies that kind of niche out. We have partners that we work with that, for example, do paid search management for large home improvement businesses in the US, and they're very, very successful. And but that's their business model. That's all they do, right? Like so, and relatively new agency, they've chosen that way. I have other people that do content and only content, right? We kind of it's almost like we've evolved and we turn down a lot of niches, and with time we work with less and less of others. And but for the home improvement, medical, and legal, we have high case studies and kind of have enough experience where we could hold our own.
Before we hit record, Shamil, we were talking about business models. Yeah, it was
Mhm.
interesting your thoughts on looking at agencies and seeing successful agencies doing different types of things, whether it's just doubling down and growing or software, or talk about some of in your mind, the business models as an agency owner that you think about.
I noticed, so in the space, there's a bunch of guys that just kind of run the way they run. They might grow a bit, they might shrink a bit, but they just kind of, it's a paycheck for them, right? There's not a lot of growth or change. I'm not counting those, right? There are other agencies that really pushing the gas pedal and are growing and scaling. You mentioned private equity. I was going to say the first 7, 8 years of me doing this, right? Like there were two inquiries to buy us at the time. And we were a bigger agency or a relatively big agency at the time. In the last 4 or 5 years, I've been approached half a dozen times, personally. So I feel that people realize that that's the market out there and they try to really push the pace. And it's easier to push the pace if you have a model that works, right? Like the paid search management, for example, or something where it's like social media management, right? You grow the portfolio, you hit the repeat button, and a lot of people try to scale that way. And it's also what your personal preferences are, right? Like, do you want to grow an agency of 100 people? I never really had that desire. I wanted to have larger clients and more complex campaigns, but I didn't want to have, 100 plus clients. So, or 100 plus or, 50 plus employees. We're 20 strong right now. Um, I enjoy the people I work with. I enjoy my clients and interactions with them. And, we're comfortable where we are, although we're growing. I see other agencies either pivot towards, developing some sort of an app, right, or web sys, right, um, application, right? They partner up with a client of theirs and build something custom for them and kind of grow that aspect of the business. Others, as I mentioned, scale and try to kind of, hit the high numbers and eventually maybe get bought out, maybe not, right? So we are at that pivotal point where we're thinking what to do. I was going to say a huge factor is the space. So, because we are, I would say, a turnkey digital marketing agency, right? Or we take care of more than one thing. We do content, SEO, paid search, and web design, right? We kind of keep it at that. Um, we've throughout a lot of the smaller side services, right? We don't take them by themselves. We could, add them on or use a partner to kind of provide that service to a client, but we're really, you know, uh, organic SEO, paid search is our key for specific niches, as I mentioned. Um, we are at a point where we're just thinking kind of what's the next logical step for us. And I was going to say that the geography really matters. We've attended a number of conferences in the US for legal versus the Canadian market. And at one of them, there were seven of my competitors with booths, right? These people were 15, 20 years senior of me, right? So you talk about 60-year-old guys who've been in the space for a long time, right? And I kind of looked at them and the question, right, is, do you want to do the same thing 20 years down the road, right? Or are you going to pivot and niche, as I mentioned, and find your own, um, I don't know.
Yeah, it was interesting. I had a friend of the podcast, Jordan Harbinger, who people can check out his podcast, Jordan Harbinger Show. He's had Mark Cuban, he's had Kobe Bryant, he's had Shaq, he's got a bunch of cool guests. And he gets millions of dollars a month, but he started as a lawyer. And he tells a story that just like what you're saying, Shamil's like he looked around, he looked at some guy who was working 80 hours a week. Maybe he was in his late 60s. He's like, I don't, I some people love that, right? And he was like, I
Didn't.
cannot see myself doing that for that. He's like, oh my, it scared him a bit. And he's like, I need to do something else. I don't think I could do this for the next whatever number of years, you know?
I have a lawyer friend who is very successful in private equity, and he's a classically trained, lawyer, but he did internship or whatever, the articling at a law firm. We had lunch the other week, and he told me, I realized I don't want to do that. I don't want it to be my life. So what I meant to say is that, like, if you want to grow and scale, I find it's a lot more lucrative and easier to grow in the US because the stigma, like, I'll explain, like, even the home improvement or lawyers that we do have as clients in the US, they go from state to state to state, right? So it is very common for a law firm to have, three or four offices at least in various states. In Canada, because of geography and the population, that's not the case, right? You're either kind of staying in the Ontario GTA area, right? Very few samples of having West Coast and East Coast exposure, right? And I feel that once you cross the gap between Canada and the US, I'm talking about just generically agency space that provide more than one service. If you're only doing pavers, it doesn't matter. You obviously attracting clients from the US. So I remember going to an LMA conference, Lawyer Marketing Association. This is during COVID, and I met a gentleman from Texas, and he was really cool. And he said something to me that he's like, maybe it's better to be, a big fish in a small pond. And I disregarded it at the time, but uh, and we still kind of do work in the U.S. But I guess the plan at this point is to dominate the Canadian legal marketing field at the very least, because I know my competitors and who they are, and we want to grow in that direction. Right, and same with home improvements. We work with some very large clients in Canada who are nationally recognized, and we do lead generation for them. So to kind of have that reputation as the go-to boutique guy, right? I feel the geography in this case helps me, right? It's a, you know, could it be easier to scale if we were in the US? Definitely, but at the same time, more I guess less competition and you know, tighter market where everybody knows everybody.
I mean, so we talked about obviously there's different agency growth models and ambitions. There's also people going into apps or software, like the famous one. Obviously, MailChimp is a famous one that was an
Yeah.
agency, and I don't know how much they sold for in the billions, but really it spun out MailChimp, a SaaS product out of it. Another one that we were talking about was equity piece, right?
Mhm.
And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on, I know, I don't know really all of the business models from Gary V, right? Gary Vaynerchuk, if people have checked out his books, but I know at one point, I don't know if he still is, but they were, bringing on brands and using the agency as a engine to build those brands, and maybe they'll keep them, maybe they'll sell them. I don't know what they're going to do, but um, talk about the equity piece with companies and your thoughts.
It has to be a good fit. I feel like, the company that brings on a marketing agency and essentially for equity piece, and I read Gary V's books, right? It has to be a good fit and a good piece. Um, some of my vendors that I work with are living in Thailand, and these guys are like the SEO groups. They go to all the SEO conferences, and one of them was in Toronto actually last month, and we went out for coffee. And he was telling me that like that's the trend right now. That's very hot, where a lot of the agencies partner up with brands, as you said, for equity, he's like that's the kind of the new thing, that he's seeing, from his from where he is. um, you know, a lot of the like I think the biggest SEO conferences happens in the world in Thailand, and he invited me to come over, and guys like Neil Patel, Backlinko, like all those guys are there, and he was telling me that like it's also Jeremy what you want to do. It's kind of like leverage what you have, right? Like the reason I love being somewhat hands-on in my business is because I love the relationships, right? The reason we stick to small to medium business is that I have direct access to decision makers, and I really enjoy that. As we have larger clients where I'm talking to marketing managers, and they're great people, and I enjoy that too. But as then it's purely business as opposed to a relationship and a connection and ability to kind of go for steak with the CEO or big law firm, like a managing partner. So my point about I've seen some agencies develop a product and sell B2B, right? So they'll develop like a content piece and they'll provide content writing services to other agencies, right? And you have to leverage your strength. If you have a back office in Thailand or Southeast Asia, right, and you manage to build a network of link building, whatever websites, right? You have relatively access to cheap, educated labor. Maybe that's the way for you to scale, right? Because you kind of leverage your strength. You have a back office in Thailand, for example. Um, to each his own, right? Like I'm on the forefronts here, right? Dealing directly with clients, building, I believe, good service, good product for them. So I think the next logical continuation is going to be something in the mix of equity, as you mentioned, uh, but something where I enjoy it as well. I don't want to be the guy behind the scenes, kind of like developing a brand. I kind of I enjoy the people aspect of it a lot.
Yeah, I just had Andrew Morgans on the podcast from Marknology, and they specialize in Amazon businesses, right? And doing marketing on Amazon. And he was telling me there's one brand, and like you said, maybe it was just a fit. He was talking about how he was working with them and he took an equity stake in it, and then they sold the company, and it was, because he was kind of the growth engine, helping with the growth engine behind that. So for that one, it worked out. For maybe others, it wouldn't work out. So it's an interesting model to think about. And I don't know, he didn't show the details if maybe they were paying him a small, not, we were talking before we hit record. There's options of like maybe they're paying him a smaller amount than they would have, right? And he gets
Mhm.
equity. And obviously, there's cases where maybe they don't pay at all, and then everything in between. So it doesn't have to be just like a one size fits all, I imagine, too.
I agree with you, and it's also your strength. If you think about it, our clients, like I have friends that own agencies that focus on e-commerce, right? I always say that we're more B2C, right? Services, whether it's home improvement service, legal service, obviously different caliber. Um, a lot of, if you're selling on Amazon, or if you're doing e-commerce, right, it's a lot more transactional, a lot more, I guess same aspects, right? But you're selling product, you want to sell more, you want to optimize your cost per acquisition of a sale. And I feel that that model that you talk about the equity, we kind of mentioned it before, that if you own 51%, and I'm a big proponent of Cody Sanchez, he's like a YouTuber personality, former private equity, right? That her whole spiel is, there's a lot of smaller businesses retiring and nobody to replace them and relatively easy to scale them. So if that's the direction I'm looking at, right? And the dilemma that you and I were talking about before is that if you own majority of it, and we're considering something like that, you would need to operate that business. And now I don't know much of an interest I have managing a plumbing company, you know. But if you have a revenue share, right, where they bring you on as an agency
There's
partner to
nothing
use
that
the
will create a
agency,
faster call in our house if the toilet is clogged. So maybe it is good. Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. And in those type of businesses, the necessity businesses, right, like plumbing, electrical work, roofing, right, like they're the ones that are going to be, and AI is not going to affect them much. Neither is ChatGPT, because you still need somebody to come over and fix it. So
ChatGPT, fix my toilet. Like that's,
exactly, exactly.
maybe they'll
You
ask it
know,
how to fix it, and then I would probably break it even more. But yeah, that's another thing.
yeah, yeah. I'm saying at the end of the day, those businesses are going to be around, and partnering up with like a service based, like on an equity level, that's something that where we're considering.
Talk about, I know you've been in this game a while. Some of your favorite software tools or resources that you like and you use to run your business.
You need a good project management tool. You need a good CRM. Um, because we have relatively low turnover of clients, we don't heavily use it, but we're with HubSpot. Um, for the project management, I feel that onboarding new staff is key. Right? There's some fancier PM project management tools out there. We use Trello, right? We kind of stuck with it. We've experimented with Monday.com, but Trello works for us. Um, there's a ton of tools for SEO, analytics, and you know, some come out every day, right? Some are cheaper than others. We use both Ahrefs and SEMrush. I guess SEMrush more than Ahrefs for sake of presentation and user experience. We use Ahrefs for link analysis more heavily, right? Bright Local for Google My Business listings and optimization. You know what I find? There are a lot of softwares that do one little thing, right? And they might be cheaper, and people always, I'm sure you see it on your feed in Instagram or whatever, Facebook, where people are like, hey, say no to Ahrefs 10 times cheaper, right? But you find that it's all glitchy. And I find that sometimes it's better to pay more, right? To use something reliable, call it a day, and optimize its use, as opposed to always try to find the new best thing that would be, $100 cheaper a month. And there's so many of them coming out. Time is of the essence, and AI, ChatGPT, kind of like you could literally ask it for all the softwares. How are you going to test them out? You're going to read reviews, right? Those reviews might be biased, or so you have to physically use all that. You know, Reddit helps, and Quora helps, and firsthand using those tools also help. Um, we use a lot of what converts, or call tracking, form tracking, conversion optimization. when we run our paid campaigns. We're also use CallRail for some of our clients, but prefer kind of what converts. Um, Other than that, I mean, there are certain plugins and softwares and addition to websites that we advocate for each of the niches we work with. There's a hot little thing called Intaker for legal field, right? It's like a little video chat that pops up with the face of the lawyer, right? How can I help you, right? And they're like pre-recorded messages that lead you into a funnel. They're very hot. They've been kind of like going through a lot of like, we see more and more law firms use them, but then they're pretty expensive, and some people say they don't really work, right? So I let the client, like we kind of give them options, and if they feel like it's an issue in the firm, we provide options for them to solve, right? But you got to understand that different businesses have different business models of how they operate. So
Shamil, I love that. Actually, I'm going to look at Intaker. There's an interview I did with Delphi. I don't know if you've ever seen it, Delphi.ai, and it lets you. So I had the founder on, but I interviewed his AI version, just me and his AI version, video version. It's fascinating. Then I put on the end of it the actual like shorter interview with the person, but I'm sure I'm wondering if people use that in the law firm space. But it's fascinating. I literally had like a regular interview with this AI version.
how realistic was it?
It was pretty phenomenal, actually.
I would
Yeah.
ask you for the link because
Yeah.
look, there's so the type type 9 form, right? Like the type form, that's a software. They developed a product called Video Apps.
Oh yeah, I've used that.
So
Yep.
I've used it too. I've installed it on some clients, and then I have clients that are just like too shy to be on camera. And I'm not gonna remember off the top of my head, but you've seen them. They're like video AI generated avatars that say what you want them to say. I forget the name of the software right now, and we've used that too, and successfully, right? But I feel like again, the more people use it, the more people realize it's AI, right? So if I know what you look like, right, like I could be, like I see that that person is not necessarily you.
And by the way,
Um,
it wasn't meant to fool, like that particular one wasn't meant to be like I'm actually interviewing the person. I said this is the person's AI video
of
clone.
them,
You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like I was totally, and that's what it's meant to be, but
it's
it's
getting
super
better and
interesting.
better. I've seen chat conversations that are very authentic. Recently, a lawyer, and I'm not gonna obviously name the firm, but I love the drive for innovation, but somebody pitched them to have like an automated AI receptionist. And these guys do litigation. And some of the partners jumped on the idea, right? And then like me and the office manager kind of put a stop to it because you could tell it was AI. And I said, listen, if you were, as you said, fixing toilets, right? Or customer support for an appliance repair store, right? But you're doing complicated matters with highly intelligent and capable people, that would definitely be a turnoff and ruin our conversion. I would love to have this conversation in 5 years. I feel that, even having an autoresponder who can have a conversation on the phone would become indistinguishable from a real person, and would kind of improve the conversion for many, many websites, because believe it or not, we still have clients who don't have a protocol of properly answering phone, getting back to the client. They're very old school.
All right, when that comes out, Shamil, I'll share it with you. You'll let me know what you think. I just want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone, check out dNOVOgroup.com to learn more and more episodes of the podcast. And we'll see everyone next time. Shamil, thanks so much.
Thank you, Jeremy,
Thanks,
for having
everyone.
me. Cheers.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.